Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kevin Askew, Director of Sales for TechXtend. I want to welcome you to today's Embarcadero webinar, No More Trial and Error of SQL Server Performance Tuning and Optimization. Today's agenda will include a brief overview on TechXtend, followed by the Embarcadero webinar hosted by Scott Walls, Senior Director of Product Management at Embarcadero, followed by a question and answers period and then a summary. TechXtend is a leading e-seller developer and infrastructure tools. It can be found on the web at www.techextend.com. We are an Embarcadero reseller, and under our ALM worldview, we sell RadStudio, JBuilder, and JBuilder. Under our database worldview, we sell DB Artisan and ER Studio. We also offer team development services, including assessment, deployment, and migration. Under our ALM worldview, we provide industry-leading tools for your end-to-end development needs, including defining, designing, developing, testing, deploying, and managing. I will now turn things over to Scott as he hosts No More Trial and Error of SQL Server Performance Tuning and Optimization webinar. Scott?
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining the webinar today. Just a quick intro for myself. I am, again, the Senior Director of Product Management here at Embarcadero Technologies. I've been with the company about 10 years now, working with the database products, focused on DB Artisan, our database development tool, Rapid SQL, DB Artisan, our administration tool, Rapid SQL, our database development tool. DB Optimizer is our performance and optimization tool, and then we also have a database change management tool called DB Change Manager. So let's go ahead and get started. We want to talk today, obviously, focused on performance, tuning, and optimization, and how to identify and solve the performance bottlenecks as quick as we can. So a quick agenda, and we did the introduction already. The performance, we want to talk about performance from a developer's perspective, right? How can we, as a developer, ensure that the code we turn over to our DBAs and thus turn it into production, we can ensure that that code is of the highest quality as well as the highest performance. Because ideally, from a pure cost perspective as well as a work perspective, right, we want to touch the code once. We want to do it, look at the spec, look at the use case, write the code, be it a stored procedure, a package, some Visual Studio code that calls a query, submits it via that way. Whatever method we use, we want to make sure that when we turn it over, it's going to scream when it hits production. We don't want to see it again. We don't want to turn it over, then have the DBA come back to us in a month and let us know that the code we turned over is now performing poorly. And then we're going to look at performance from a DBA perspective, right? The person that's working 24 hours on call, trying to figure out how to optimize the performance of the database. We want to talk about what we can use at our disposal from a tool perspective to help us, number one, identify the bottlenecks, and number two, solve them, right? And really identifying those bottlenecks are sometimes require the most work, but I think I've got some tricks up the sleeves here with the products that I think I'll be able to show you that will make the job a lot easier for you. And then lastly, Q&A. We'll have it open for Q&A. In the meantime, I don't want you to feel like you have to wait to answer any questions. Go ahead and fire when ready. Use the Q&A manager in the WebEx, and we'll be able to look at those as I'm going. If I see anything during the webinar, I'll stop, take a question, and then jump right back into the webinar. So please feel free to go ahead and submit the questions as they come to your mind. So next, before we really jump in and go any further, we have a couple of poll questions we'd like to ask. So Sarah, if you could go ahead and put that up. You'll see the polling over in the lower right-hand corner. At least that's where I'm seeing it on my panel. If you could go ahead and we have just a couple of questions. What database administration tool do you use if you're an administrator? DB Artisan, or the Embarcadero tool, SQL Server Management Studio, Quest Toad, Redgate, Idera, maybe a homegrown solution, or none of the above. And then what SQL development tool do you use? Again, do you use Rapid SQL from Embarcadero, Management Studio, Quest Toad, Redgate, Idera, or none of the above? So we'll give you a little bit of time to go ahead and answer those. And Sarah, if you'll go ahead and just let me know when you're going to close it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. So as we talk today, we're going to be focused on SQL Server, and I'll be walking you through a little bit about the environment that I'm going to be working in. I've got the tools on my machine. I'm running it against a SQL Server 2008 virtual machine that's also running on my machine. I chose to do that today versus connecting via our VPN to our labs in Toronto and overseas just for speed. But again, the tools that I'm showing today obviously can be run in your environment. I'm running a SQL Server 2008 client on the tool on my desktop, and that's what I'm using to connect to the SQL Server 2008 database. All right, there we go. All right, great. So I'm not sure. I'm guessing you can see it, but a pretty much overwhelming response came using SQL Server Management Studio, which is expected. So that's good information to have. Let me see. I think that's about it as far as the questions are concerned. Let me talk a little bit here about DB PowerStudio. DB PowerStudio is a suite that we offer, and this is going to be my 2-minute commercial for Embarcadero. Then I'll jump into the tools. But DB PowerStudio is that suite geared towards improving quality and performance at every stage of the life cycle, be it database development life cycle or obviously application life cycle. So in the first pane, we've got database admin and development. We've got DB Artisan and Rapid SQL, our tools that I'll show you today. Performance tuning and SQL optimization, which is taken care of with DB Optimizer. And then the last tenet of DB PowerStudio is database change management. And if you don't have a formal change management policy in place where you are, I'd encourage you to go ahead onto our website at Embarcadero.com, go to the free trial section, and download a free trial of DB PowerStudio for SQL Server, and give our DB Change Manager tool specifically a run. I think you'll find what it can do for you with regards to managing the change across your databases is very powerful, to be able to track those changes and propagate those changes from test to QA, from QA to production, and run nightly jobs to sync those environments up, keep them in sync, and also track changes that might filter in behind or around your formal change management process. I know we've had customers that have used it against third-party applications and have actually found issues with third-party applications when they've upgraded from one version to another, to the point of being able to send the script back to the vendor and let them know, here is your problem. Here is the index that you didn't include in version 3.0 that you had in version 2.0. Thus, this is why the system's slow. And in this situation, the vendor was actually telling them there's obviously something wrong with your environment because our application is just fine. So that's DB PowerStudio. Again, go to our website and you can download a copy of that. So right now, let me go ahead and share my desktop. Go ahead and open up. We'll open up Rapid SQL first. So here we're looking at Rapid SQL, our database development tool. We're connecting here to SQL Server, but again, we're able to connect to IBM DB2 LUW, IBM DB2 ZOS, the mainframe, Sybase, ASE, Oracle, as well as SQL Server. We can also connect to Interbase, which is our proprietary database from Embarcadero, and MySQL. So here we're looking in, we've connected a straight connection in, we're going right into the database, into the schemas, going right into DBO, and here are all the objects. Very similar to other tools that you've used. And we can go in here to a table, take a look, and we'll right-click, and here are all the options you have for each of the objects. We can open up the object And again, I just want to cover this quickly as it's sort of the foundation for the tools that we're going to show. Here's the object editor. It's all about the user experience. We're trying to make things easy for you, put them in a nice graphical user interface that you can see what's going on and drill in, make the changes needed. In this case, if we have a column, I just created a new one earlier, I can move it up, put it anywhere I'd like to. I can press Alter. The application determines if we can do that simply with a create column or an alter table. If it can't, it's going to generate the code for us to create what we refer to as extended alter. So it's going to drop all the constraints, create a new table, moving that column to the middle, inserting the data back into the table, and then recreating all the other the constraints, the indexes, any kind of views or stored procedures. So just by moving that up, it resulted in 401 lines of SQL code. So again, it's certainly not a trivial matter, but something that using a tool like this, you can leverage the power of the tool. So let's hop out of here. We'll go over to a stored procedure that I have. So this is a stored procedure that I've written. If I want to execute it, simply right-click, press Execute. We also have an integrated debugger that we can step right in and debug step by step. So again, we're ensuring the quality of the code from a logic perspective. We're able to set breakpoints, all the standard functionality you find in a debugging API. Breakpoints, watch windows, modify the data. So again, when you're stepping through and you want to make sure all your use cases are valid and you can test against them, simply use the variable window, change the variable values, and you can watch the logic of your code change. So here we've run the store procedure. Let's step back. I want to pull out a block of SQL. We'll just run this block out and open up a new SQL window. And when we're talking about performance, right, we also want to be able to understand and do explain plan. So here I can turn on the explain plan, the query plan, run this. Let me get out of here quick. Here I'm just setting up the demo so we can get over to the tools. So here's a standard explain plan. Right, this is what you can find in the other tools that are on the market, and there's where we can actually go in and look at the values, look at the actual information from the explain plan. We can drill in there and look to see how our query is actually performing. But more important though, from a development perspective, we can create these stored procedures, triggers, what have you, but we really want to put it through a full test environment, a full test cycle. So with that, we want to turn it over and look at DB Optimizer. So let me go ahead and get that going. All right, so here we are using DB Optimizer. This is our performance and optimization tool. And in this part of the demo, I want to talk to you how you would approach it from a developer perspective. So here we open up, and I'll go ahead and copy this so we can walk through the entire workflow with you. So we're going to open up, we're going to connect to the data source, simple right-click, connect. We're going to do a new SQL file. We're just going to drop this in right there. So here we are. We have a little breadcrumb up here letting us know that we're connected to my SQL Server virtual machine working on the GIM database. We're going to go ahead and run it just to validate that it runs. Everything comes back good. So right now we're at a pretty good confidence level that our query is running. It's coming back a good response, so everything's good. But to take it a step further, we want to make sure though that it is indeed optimized. Are there any ways to make it quicker? So here we can turn it over to a tuning SQL session. So here we can generate cases, and you'll see some of the cases actually being generated, and we'll be able to see those. We can perform a detailed analysis of each statement and then execute each generated case. I'm going to go ahead and execute each case 4 times so I can get some decent data to look at. So at this point, we're going to run it, and you can see what's happening here. And DB Optimizer went through and created an entire suite of different iterations of the SQL statement. We can pan out here and look at the cost as well as the execution statistics. We can look here that our initial run, if I double click, we can look at the initial SQL statement. It was the fastest. There's really no need to go to make any changes. If we wanted to see what other options were available, we can go ahead and double click, and we can see here that it used a with serialized hint. So again, if it was applicable and if it made sense, we'd see some significant, maybe a green, the bar would turn green, and we'd be able to see some different values here. But again, we want to look over at the analysis section, and this is where it gets interesting from a tuning perspective when we actually drill in and start looking at the values and the data that were presented. So here's our index analysis section. So we can look and see, here is an index suggested to be created. We've got a couple of opportunities here to create indexes that might indeed speed up the performance even more, but yet they may have a detrimental effect depending on what other operations are being done against the database. Here, if it's green, it's letting us know that that is indeed used when you run the statement. So here are some other, it has no effect on a statement. So it's getting us a nice index analysis. Over in the right-hand pane, we're looking at our visual SQL tuning diagram. This is something you're only going to find in DB Optimizer. It's different than a graphical explain plan, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So here on the right-hand pane, we can hover over, and we can get the statement to actually create the object. So we can look and hover over and look at each. If we select it, we can see where in the query on the left, it's highlighted in yellow. I hope you can see that with the WebEx session. And then down below, we can see the queries that affect that object. So I can go up to here and look at this and see where that's being used, and then finally the V client portfolio. Look at that. I want to add, though, one other item here, and that's called the show ratio and accounts. So we'll go ahead and calculate these. And now we're starting to see some numbers. Right, so if we want to look at actual row counts, so this is where we get into the concept of running row counts. We want to minimize our running row counts. So here you can see that I've started up the chain, and we're able to reduce, and finally at the bottom we're looking at 23, and that's how many rows are in the table. And this is down to a 2% with one row. So the result set being one row was 2% of that table, actually 0.02% of the table. If I need to get further in, I can double-click, and we'll expand this out. Sometimes we've determined that, the query is running as fast as we think it could be. Where else could the problem be? And in this example, the problem could be, it could lie in the view. And so how is the view accessed? How is it created? Could potential problem be lying within the view creation? So here we can look and actually see what queries are being used to create the view. And again, we can hover over things, select items. We can do that as well with the client, look at the different objects in the client table, as well as the broker table that's already out. So this is all about visual SQL tuning, and as we change things, these are affected in our diagram as well. So this is when you know what you have, and you're good to go. You drop your query in. You can also go to the steps of a new tuning job. From a developer, then we know we want to work in this, but we're going to take a look and extract it from the database object. So here we've got real-time filtering. So as I type, I know what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and grab broker client breakdown. That's my very long stored procedure. So here it's going through and pulling all the statements out. It's going to parse them all. Then we're going to go through, and the errors detected just basically tell us that we have bind variables. And I've got this stored procedure is filled with bind variables, so that's why I'm going to get actually 19 areas that I need to add, 19 statements that I need to put bind variables in. We're making some changes around this to streamline this user interface, but I think you get the point that if a stored procedure has multiple queries, which what stored procedures don't, and sometimes a stored procedure gets a bad rap. Well, when you really start stepping into it, the issue is not the entire stored procedure. It may come down to just a couple of SQL statements. So to be able to go through and tune and let the let the tool, let DB Optimizer go through, parse out all the SQL statements, and then run the cases, run the tool against each statement, and then come back and let you know that, there is a statement that I need to worry about. And oh, by the way, DB Optimizer has told me exactly how to fix that. And I want to show you that in this example here. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to pull this query out, and it's going to be very simple, but I think you'll get the point. New. This is a Cartesian join, right? And I think we've all maybe at one time or another have done that. Sometimes in tests, though, in our development environment, and we don't catch it right away because maybe our test data, our samples are so low, are so small that we can get by. This query ran in just a matter of seconds. So again, I'm thinking, it's acceptable. I look at some of the data, and it doesn't really jump out maybe that something's wrong. But if I want to run it through, though, again, I suggest doing a tuning on every opportunity we have. We're going to go ahead and perform the detail analysis again, execute the cases twice, and go ahead and run. So the job's getting ready to run. And here we go. And it actually tells us here. I'll let it finish. So we can see we've got the UI here letting us know how much longer to go. Go ahead and pop these out. Then as it's finishing up, you can see where I mentioned here, you've got the queries. The color bar lets you know that there's not much of a change between the original and this new rewrite. If it's red, it's actually going to be slower. If it's green, we've got a faster way to do it. So here, we can look in this. It's telling us that there's a missing join. So I'm going to expand that. When it's finished here, I'll be able to generate the cases. We'll go ahead and run this. There we go. All the cases generated. And again, it's going to remove all the clutter and only come back with the information that we need. So here, we look at the original one, and we can see that the Cartesian join, there's no join on these two tables. If I go to this one here, I can actually see that the tool put the where clause in for us. So we were able to detect via the data dictionary, looking at the system tables, referential integrity, that there was an opportunity there to put a where clause. And again, if you hover over this, missing, the result set may be altered. And again, in this situation, the result set is altered a little bit, less than half of what it was. But that's the one we want to go with, and we see this. So we're going to right-click on this and clone the case. So here up here now, we have detailed analysis. We can go ahead and look at each one. So stepping over to the detailed analysis section, I have here, we're in red, letting us know that we've got an issue. There are no joins between these two tables. If I drop this down to number 2, we can see that now the join's there. If I look at the detailed analysis, we can look and we've got it down to 5,600 rows. If I go back to number 1 and run the detailed analysis again, we can see where we are. We're going to join those, the Cartesian product, and we're going to get over 12,000 rows. So here's just a really quick way to go through, use the tool to identify the query and run it through it, find any issues that might be there, and then suggest rewrites. In this situation, it caught an opportunity for us to fix a Cartesian join. Again, very simple, but I encourage you to put some very heavy-duty queries against this and let the tool do its work, and I think you'll be very impressed with what the tool comes back with. Now, the other thing that we're concerned about when we're looking at these queries, let me find one. Okay, here we go. Is how it runs. Though, it can run fine when we run it one time. But how many times have we found out that when we do this, right, running it once is not the issue, because the query runs, very quickly. But the issue here is that our query is run multiple times, and the way the system's set up is this query could be run one time, but it's run 1 million times a day. So if we can just cut 10% of the performance down on this query, we can potentially save a lot of time during the course of a day. So let's go ahead and show you the SQL load facility found within DB Optimizer. So here I'm taking this SQL statement, looking at it here. We've got the data source we need. We're going to go number of parallel sessions. We'll bump this to 20. We want to run it a certain number of executions 5 times with fixed delay of 250 milliseconds. Now this is where I'm going to step over and start the talking about profiling and what it means to profile with DB Optimizer. So here let's do a profile of data source. So it's going to initialize this. So right now what we're focused on with DB Optimizer is wait times. Right? It's important for us to understand that if a process is waiting, it's not doing anything, we've got an issue, we want to address this. So one way we can do this is doing a profile session. So while this is profiling, I'm going to go ahead and run our load job. So now we're executing the load. Keep running here. I ignored that message, I hope. Okay, we're starting to see some issues come through now. We can see here that the load's executing. So as we go through this, then we can put that block of SQL through a little load. Granted, just to be clear, it's not a load runner or a heavy-duty loading type application. This is something to drop your SQL against, run it in a controlled environment, and be able to profile it to see what kind of issues potentially could come up when it's run over and over and over again. This is going to run then until we can knock it out. I believe what we said 10 times. At 20 maximum number of 5 executions. So it's going to take a little time. We're putting a little bit of stress on my local database here. All right, as we can see, if we step back, we're still profiling. All right, so from here then, as we profile, we're capturing information. So from a developer's perspective, we're running our code through the tuner, making sure we're getting all any potential rewrites, any Cartesian joins that might be there, anything that can help us improve the performance of the query, and DB Optimizer will point those out to us. We can then turn it over and run it through the SQL load utility, right, to make sure that when it's put under a load environment, a load situation, we can ensure ourselves as well as the DBAs that the code that we have is going to work for us. And then finally, the DBA is going to look at it from a profiling perspective and be able to grab any and all wait time analysis that might be going on. So I'm going to let this finish and turn it over to what we have then for the DBA from the DBA's perspective. So first, I want to talk about DB Artisan, which is our administration tool. A long tool in the market. We've been out in since early 90s. Cut our teeth on Sybase, moved over to Oracle and SQL Server back in the late 90s. So we've had a lot of experience with SQL Server, taken part in most of the technical preview programs, and certainly feel that SQL Server is a great market for us, and we've got a lot of loyal, dedicated customers of DB Artisan using it against SQL Server. So here I'm connected to 2008, my R2. I can look again, very similar to what our database development tool look like. We're drilling down. We can drill down here, and unlike the database development tool, when we select the object here, we're able to go ahead and look at the objects displayed over in the right-hand pane. We can do multiple operations on this if we need to update statistics to ensure that we don't have stale stats on the objects. We can simply highlight the ones we need and then execute, and the product will go ahead and execute the statement. If we ever want to see what we're doing, we can look at the preview, and we can see exactly what DB Artisan is going to run. So some customers will use this as just a tool to generate the script, move it over to a SQL window, save it, schedule it for later. A lot of options to do within the product. They let the product do a lot of the work. So let me step over then and start looking at Performance Analyst. So this is another real-time analysis tool for the DBA to use when trying to determine bottlenecks. So we have the ability to set up alerts on each data source and alarms. So let's go ahead. These are the option settings. We can go into the alarms, look at the different alarms that are active on this data source. We have number of errors in the current log. Number is greater than, if it's greater than 0, I want to be alerted. And right now we have 5. Databases on the same disk as log, right? There's 8 of those. I have 1 database requiring backup, extents allocated. So we can see different areas of how we actually, with this, my instance, I've just taken exactly what we've delivered out of the box. So if I look at the home screen, I can see right now that I've got number of errors in the error log. It's 5. I can go right to the error log if I'd like to. I can drill in here a little bit, look at memory, different metrics based on different headings here. This is the memory. If I can go to I/O, we can look at the different page reads, page writes, where things, where things stand real time within the database. And here we're doing most of our reading against the DMVs of SQL Server. From a space perspective, here's that alert there. Database is needing the same. Right, I can right-click on that and go to the options and really look into that and drill into that if I need to. We can look at the Databases tab, database requiring backup, extents allocated. Again, a lot of real-time metrics. We can also go to the top SQL. So at this point, we can go into the criteria. We can look at SQL statements or stored procedures. We can drill down by any of the databases, put the SQL contains. There are a lot of options there. Go back to the summary, and we can look at what's being run. We can go down here to the SQL details and actually look at all of the SQL that's being executed. Right, if we want to look at order it by average reads, we can certainly do that. And there's one that, right, there's that Cartesian join SQL. So we can really quickly highlight what's potentially causing a bottleneck in our systems. If we get to a point that we found it and we need to terminate it, we can go to the database monitor. At this point, we can highlight, we can come down, potentially find the process, and simply click the kill button, and we're ready to kill the process. So if we've got a runaway query and we found it, simply use DB Artisan, go to the database monitor, find the process, knock it out right there. So that's from a DBA perspective. Using your administration tool, DB Artisan has a performance analyst that can give you the real-time metrics. But just as important, though, and here's my load still running against it, so everything's good there. You can see a few little spikes here, nothing really to worry about. But what I want to show you, though, are a couple, actually 3 examples that I've been able to borrow, if you will, from some customers in real-world examples, right, to show you exactly what we can find out using DB Optimizer and actually profile the database. So in this one, right, it was a really bad SQL command. Right, we can look and see and drill down, and we can find the machine, the details. Right, we can actually look to see what's going on there. Right, it actually had an old version of their program, and the software on this machine wasn't updated. So using DB Optimizer, they were able to profile the database and actually determine what statements were causing the bottleneck. So at any time, with DB Optimizer, we can really streamline this and go in and highlight the exact area that we want to look at the bottlenecks. Maybe we want to get rid of all the other information on the screen and just focus on one certain time frame. We can do that within the tool. No big deal. If we want to, at any time, go in, let me get one there. We can look again as I select things. We can look down below. It gives us the actual count. We can look at the CPU by events. We can look at sessions. see the data pertaining to sessions. So again, in this example, we were able to find the active session, drill in, and determine exactly the SQL statement. Look at the machine, go to that machine, and find out exactly what that person was doing to cause the issues. In this one, this was an example where inserts and select, we're low on memory, right? So you can see some of the spikes going on. This is a very, very active database. So as we looked in, we could drill in and start seeing exactly what was happening. Right? We were seeing the actual statements that were causing the bottlenecks. Right? Going through here, look at the session information. Right? And then you could see where the database went idle, and then boom, back up again. So we're able to go again and look. Where's this happening? Right? Look at the sessions that are running this. So again, we have a lot of information. Right? We hover over this, and we can see the context menu pops up. This occurs when a task is waiting on a latch for a buffer that is in an I/O request. Right? So again, DB Optimizer allows you to see that, right, just by using the tool. Granted, I'm sure most of you probably have some tools in-house or are using some tools that can give you a way to find this information, but DB Optimizer is going to take you right to it. And again, real time, if I was monitoring this, it would continue to loop through, and I could stop at any time and restart it. Another nice thing about DB Optimizer is these are fully contained files. So this profile session actually came from a consultant that is using our tool, and he was nice enough to let me use it. And all he had to do was email it to me, and I had it. So imagine being able to use this tool, right? Capture the profile session, drill in. If I'm comfortable with the database, comfortable with what's going on, maybe I can recommend the solution. But maybe sometimes I need to turn it over and send it to another DBA and say, you know, Caesar, can you identify what's going on here? Are you able to pinpoint? I think I know, but I want another set of eyes. Well, they don't have to be profiling at the right time to be able to get it. You can send it to them. They bring it right in, and they can look at the data. And maybe that other DBA's got the experience needed to be able to tell you, oh, I know exactly where that statement's coming from, and yes, we can do something about that. So that's another beauty of DB Optimizer, the ability to move those files around, share them amongst the DBA team. Then last example I want to show is our blocking example. And this one actually had the wrong database configuration, right? Or the critical selection, the monitors were multi-thread software. The real problem was in the criteria selection in the multi-threaded software. It was really, really causing some issues. And you can see the database was in good shape here, but then all of a sudden we went into a situation that we had some serious locks going on. So again, we can hover over, look at the statement, we can select it, get the statement down below, and drill in and see what's happening. Look at the events, look at the sessions that are running this, just to understand where it might be coming from so we can go a step further and track it down. So these are just 3 examples of where we found that DB Optimizer was able to pinpoint the problem. And these were problems that were happening in their production environments that they were struggling trying to determine. And the consultant went in and using the tools were able to get connected and figure it out, no problem. So another thing I want to talk about was the filter. I didn't touch on that earlier. There's a lot of things we can filter on. We can filter on application if we'd like, put an application name in, and hover it that way. Again, here I'll select none, so we're in good shape. If I select that command, I can do an insert. Let me just do a select, and we'll refresh that, and it'll restrict it down to just select commands. So again, a lot of flexibility found within the tool. Lastly, what I want to talk about before opening it up to some Q&A is we talked here. I'm going to go ahead and stop that profiling and the load. Just really quick, a hot item right now obviously is 24/7 monitoring. And one of the tools that we offer is our Performance Center product. And here we're actually monitoring real-time these data sources, a lot of SQL Server as well as DB2 Oracle and Sybase. and running it, monitoring 24/7 with alerts and thresholds, with the ability to really, what I like to refer to as a set it and forget it product. You set it once, you set up the alerts the way you'd like, forget about it. If you're not getting emails or text or pages from us, you don't have to worry about it, because nothing's met your thresholds yet. And I know a lot of customers, this is certainly a hot item, to be able to do that, to be able to have the confidence that there's a tool monitoring for you, and so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to write a homegrown application to go ahead in there and monitor those data sources and give you the confidence that when you leave for the day, you'll know about something if it needs to be taken care of well before it results in possibly a production outage, or last thing you want is a phone call in the middle of the night from the support desk letting you know that the database is down. So Performance Center is our 24/7 monitoring solution, and if I drill in a little bit on one of our SQL Server data sources, and this is actually even more. I'm running this on I'm not able to do that right now. I'm actually running it via a remote desktop session. And this is the enterprise view. I could drill in and actually see some more information if I had access to it, but right now I don't. So at this time, Sarah, I want to turn it over to Q&A, and we'll see if we have any questions and answers. Well, I'll give the answers, hopefully.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A on the right or in the chat box, and we'll have Scott answer them.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I just want to let you know in the meantime, while we're waiting for anybody to put them in, is that a recording of the webinar will be available on our website later on today or tomorrow morning. We also thank you for attending today's webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at info@techextend.com or at 800-221-7710 in the U.S., Canada 888-423-2700. Sarah, do we have any questions? Nope? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to once again thank you everybody for attending. We do have one. All right, Sarah, here we go.
Scott, what is the performance impact of using these tools, i.e. compared to Microsoft SSMS?
Sure, great question. Our DB Optimizer, the tool that I spent most of my time with today with regarding the profiling and the tuning, in our labs and in our customer environments, we're down to between 1.5 and 2% overhead on the database to run a full profiling session and actively profile against the database. The footprint, the overhead is extremely low. I know there are other products out there that sometimes cause an issue because they're running against the environment. But our tools, we've really focused on this, is specifically on DB Optimizer, to get the lowest footprint possible to bring in the least amount of overhead. So, negligible with regard to what kind of impact it would have on the database.
Thanks, Scott. One more. Can we optimize Oracle SQLs as well? I can see this tool can connect to many databases. We just saw tuning of SQL Server, but can we do the same for Oracle?
Yes, we can. We can tune SQL Server, as I showed. We can tune Oracle as well. And, if you go back to some of the hint-based stuff, there's over 100 hints for Oracle, and we take care of all those for you. We'll run through iterations. We do the same for Sybase as well as DB2 and UDB.
Okay.
All right. It doesn't look like there are any more questions. Again, thank you, everybody, for attending. And once again, thank you, Scott, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.